Welcome, everyone, to our interview with Framework Ventures founders Michael Anderson and Vance Spencer. For those who don't already know, Framework is a VC shop that's a venture capital firm, sometimes described as a DeFi studio. We'll talk all about that today. Framework is one of the largest venture capital firms in the DeFi space, and it's going to be great to dig into it today with Michael and Vance. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here with you both. Before we get started talking about DeFi proper, you guys both have really interesting backgrounds in the consumer tech space. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got into DeFi.
Sure. I'll kick it off. My start in my career was in consumer technology. I was a product manager at Dropbox and then Snapchat for a number of years. What I focused on at both of those businesses was building out the monetization platform. So this means anything that touched money at those two companies, we were in charge of building. So that really kind of built into payments, commerce, and billing product. From there, actually, Vance and I started a startup together in the space, and we were living together and were investing on an informal basis at the time, on an angel basis. And from there, we had a great time building Hashleets, which is a digital collectible platform for professional athletes, somewhat akin to what is now Top Shot. But after that, we started Framework, and I'll let Vance tell his side of the story.
Sounds like great training. Vance, jump in. Talk a little bit about your background in consumer tech and what some of the things were that you were doing prior to getting into the DeFi space.
Yeah, my background in consumer tech is at Netflix. I spent almost 4 years there working on corporate development. First, as we were kind of launching the streaming service in North America with that first kind of slate of originals, House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. Netflix had really transitioned from a DVD company to a streaming company fairly recently when I joined, and it was still only available in North America. So after we kind of launched that platform, we launched internationally, and I went and lived in Tokyo for 2.5 years, leading corporate development for basically all Northern Asia growth. And that was, really interesting and really constructive, just both to kind of understand what does tech look like on a global stage, but also getting familiar with crypto in an Asian context, because that was basically Michael and I's background, throughout this entire time period on nights and weekends. So it was, in the end, very constructive and informative to kind of how we invest today.
Yeah. So tell me about the transition, guys. You guys both had sort of very successful careers at some of the hottest shops in Silicon Valley, and yet you decide to make this transition from doing what you were doing into DeFi. What was that transition like? How did you make it? And what did you see, most importantly, in the DeFi space that had you so excited?
Yeah, so when we were working at Snapchat and Netflix, respectively, we were following along the industry, watching from the sidelines, but really it was Hashleets that drove us in to start building something in the space. We felt that non-fungible tokens were going to have a real consumer application, and I think we're starting to see that now. But in DeFi in particular, we started investing in things like Chainlink and Ethereum, because we recognized the programmable value transfer was really kind of the core competency of what a blockchain would be able to enable. And then after the Hashleets experience, really what we saw with DeFi was that not only were there no form-fit investment firms that were investing on a venture basis in the space, but there weren't any venture firms that were rolling up their sleeves and really digging in on a software basis. And so with Framework, what we wanted to do was take a lot of our experience building consumer product, take some of our experience from building in the space, and build a form-fit venture firm that we would have loved to take capital from when we were doing Hashleets. And so that's what we have with Framework. And Framework is really kind of two concepts at the same time. It's Framework Ventures and Framework Labs. The lab side is building software. We're facilitating marketplaces. We're participating at a level that I think is a bit differentiated from most other traditional venture funds. And then the venture side is making those core investments, and they work really symbiotically.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And this is sort of the notion of the DeFi studio. So tell us, for people who have a background in venture capital, for example, this is an interesting hybrid model. Vance, how do you think about that and how the two become symbiotic?
In crypto, the capital is largely commoditized, and giving people cash for tokens, which is an investment primitive, is great, but it really doesn't help, effectively bootstrap the flywheel that you need for these things to be successful. How do you get your first $100 million of liquidity? How do you get your first $1 billion of trade volume, your first 100,000 customers? Those are things that are so important. And because there is no moat in crypto, all the IP is open source, it can be copied, it can be forked. The real important thing is who's going to come in and spin the flywheel to start it. And for most of these protocols, that's their biggest problem. How do you cold start something like this? And so for us, we for almost a year before we formally raised capital, we were thinking through what is the best corporate entity structure? How do you get the most amount of alpha? How do you help these teams in the most constructive way possible? And we took notes from places like Berkshire Hathaway, IAC, BetaWorks. That's a little bit lesser known, but those are the models where you can actually affect change in the portfolio companies that you have and increase their odds of success very drastically. And so that's kind of where the rubber meets the road with us. And what that means practically is you need, a 10, 20, 30 person engineering team. You need the balance sheet and resources on the lab side to go after things. You need the legal innovation to be able to understand, okay, what are the risks in these various protocols and are they worth the trade-offs? And for us, that's what this holistic concept actually means, is really kind of the combination of investing with labs. And it becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy with the success of these projects. And it also just helps us get so much more deal flow. And so that's kind of the ultimate, combination in this space. And, for the generalist firms, they just aren't willing to go to the lengths we are to kind of win deals and to participate in this ecosystem. And for, 30-something, young guys, that's exactly our advantage. And we're just going to kind of, drive through that window of opportunity.
Well, that's a substantial mandate. Tell us a little bit about how you manage that. How many employees do you have right now? What do the roles look like? What does that look like from a day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, it's definitely broader than just a traditional venture fund that you would see. What we have is really an engineering-focused organization primarily, with a venture team that's working hand in glove with an engineering team to either work on the individual portfolio companies and the launches that they have coming up, or to have the feedback mechanism where we're actually understanding a little bit better about what the investments are doing, understanding about what the marketplace is seeing, understanding what the technology is doing. And so right now we have about 17 people working at Framework. Everybody's on the same team, but has different mandates. We have a number of people that are focused just on the venture investing, but the majority of the team is focused on building. And that's the labs aspect that I was talking about earlier. And what we do every week is we get together and we talk about the portfolio and we talk about the tech. But I think that coming at it from a software orientation is definitely a different lens. But when we're talking about open source networks, open source protocols, anyone can be building on top of these protocols. So it makes sense for us, a potentially large stakeholder in the network, to be building on top of them too.
Yeah, and that's fascinating and a differentiator for you guys, that you come to this from the tech side. You understand things in a different way than someone who's just an investor, someone who spent their college years reading Graham Dodd. It's a fascinating perspective that you guys have.
It's also advantageous relative to the talent that's in crypto today. In crypto, you basically have people who have been investing in these protocols through these cycles, and they don't have a Web 2 background, but they are relatively experienced and have a lot of subject matter expertise. And then you have kind of on the other side of the spectrum, the generalist VCs who don't really understand the tech. They're willing to throw large chunks of money into things that look and feel like Ethereum, but there's really no nuance beyond that. And so there is a market for what we're providing very clearly. And in our perspective, the more people that copy that, the better. Like, crypto deserves a better class of investors. We need to do things like, developing the late stage capital cycle. We need to do things like lobbying regulators to accept, our viewpoint of the world. And that just requires people who actually understand the sophistication of what we're doing at a nuanced level.
Hey, if you like this clip, be sure to check out the full interview and more only on realvision.com/crypto. It's 100% free. Sign up now.